Hi, it's Gale Watkins, pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Phoenix. Thinking about what to preach on starting this Sunday, May the 3rd, I thought since we're going through a difficult time, all of us, I should find some biblical character that we could learn from, somebody who went through some very difficult times. And there are so many different people that are in Scripture that suffered greatly. You've got the Apostle Paul, you've got Joseph, but the one that I settled on is the character of Daniel. And so I want to begin today several sermons on the first part of the book of Daniel, the biographical part of the book. So let's start today with chapter 1. I'll read chapter 1 for us, and then the sermon is called, Who Do You Think You Are? In the third year of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord let King Jehoiakim of Judah fall into his power, as well as some of the vessels of the house of God. These he brought to the land of Shinar, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his gods. Then the king commanded his palace master Ashpenaz to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and of the nobility, young men without physical defect and handsome, versed in every branch of wisdom, endowed with knowledge and insight, and competent to serve in the king's palace. They were to be taught the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the royal rations of food and wine. They were to be educated for 3 years, so that at the end of that time they could be stationed in the king's court. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the tribe of Judah. The palace master gave them other names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine. So he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. Now God allowed Daniel to receive favor and compassion from the palace master. The palace master said to Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king. He has appointed your food and your drink. If he should see you in poorer condition than the other young men of your own age, you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel asked the guard whom the palace master had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Please, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. You can then compare our appearance with the appearance of the young men who eat the royal rations, and deal with your servants according to what you observe. So he agreed to this proposal and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was observed that they appeared better and fatter than all the young men who had been eating the royal rations. So the guard continued to withdraw their royal rations and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and skill in every aspect of literature and wisdom. Daniel also had insight into all visions and dreams. At the end of the time that the king had set for them to be brought in, the palace master brought them into the presence of Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them. And among them all, no one was found to compare with Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they were stationed in the king's court. In every matter of wisdom and understanding concerning which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel continued there until the first year of King Cyrus. Who do you think you are? If somebody asks you that, it's not a good sign. It means you've come across as uppity. Who do you think you are? You could ask Daniel that question. Daniel, who do you think you are? You could be digging ditches like other exiles, but no, you're enrolled in a 3-year seminar on all things Babylonian. You could be living on bread and water like your fellow Israelites, but you're given the very best. The king's own menu. That's what you get. What a life. You see, Daniel and his 3 friends are not your average exiles. They're the brightest and the best. Daniel is extraordinarily gifted, but remember where he's from. He's from Judah. Judah was on the losing side in a confrontation with King Nebuchadnezzar. Now he's in Babylon, and he's not in charge. He doesn't even get to keep his own name. So Daniel, who do you think you are? Telling the people in charge of your education that you'd rather not eat their food? Who do you think you are? It's a really serious question. It's a question of our identity. And we'll learn from Daniel. Babylon has said to Daniel, this is who you are. You're an exile. We can give you any name we please. We'll name you after one of our own gods, just to let it sink in that your God did not come through. We're in charge around here. So we'll give you a new name, Belteshazzar. You're part of Babylon, no, and you better learn to love it. No doubt there were others, fellow students with Daniel and his 3 friends in that 3-year training program, who were willing to let Babylon give them new names, tell them who they were. Babylon is a sophisticated world power, a leader in culture and literature. And if you're one of the highly talented young men so recognized to be part of this training program, that's an honor. Walter Brueggemann calls this a subtle royal seduction, tempting the best and the brightest to seek, quote, success through conformity. Success through conformity. Don't rock the boat. You have to go along to get along. Eat what's put before you. Now, our situation is a lot different from Daniel's. We don't live in ancient Babylon. But we're like him in this. Our world, as well, is quite willing to tell us who we are. I know we're supposed to be God's people. 1 Peter tells us we are a holy nation. Jesus says you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. We don't cut ourselves off from our environment and head for the hills. As we say, we're to be in the world, but not of it. And that is a hard balancing act. So easy to forget who we really are. We're told, you're a consumer, you're an American, you're a nice person. Brueggemann says we run the risk of forgetting who we are and whose we are. So who do you think you are? The way that we answer that question is very important. Are we primarily Americans or consumers or workers, or are we children of God? So Daniel, who do you think you are? He's a lot of things. He's the best and the brightest. He's good looking. He's gifted. He's on the fast track to advancement. Those are all true. But that's not the whole story. The great thing about Daniel, something we can learn from him, he never forgets who he really is. I'm a child of God. That's who Daniel thinks he is. And for that reason, when Babylon makes a demand that flies in the face of who he really is, he says no. What was it about the king's rich food that he found objectionable? Hard to know. Whatever his reasoning was, he resolved he would not defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine. It wasn't just preference. Maybe he sensed that if he kept eating their food, he would be in a position of owing his Babylonian masters. Whatever his reason was, he drew the line at that point. He let them call him Belteshazzar. He learned their language. He read their books. But when it came time to eat, Daniel said, no, I will not partake. Daniel, you're just too stubborn. Some people are. But you read the story of Daniel, you realize he's a very thoughtful, level-headed person. He's even considerate of the immediate supervisor's position. Daniel knows that if his physique shows ill effects from abstaining from the king's food, it could endanger the people around him. So he says, let's do it as an experiment. Let's try this for 10 days, and then we'll see what happens. Remarkable things take place in this story besides Daniel's own courageous speech. It's surprising that the authorities allow him to run the experiment. They didn't have to. They could have said, eat what's put before you or you're out of the program. And it's also remarkable that in just 10 days, Daniel's diet paid dividends for him and for his friends who joined him. They're healthier than all the young men who had been eating the royal rations. Plus, they outperformed all the other students in literature and wisdom. They were ahead of the class. And there's one more thing about Daniel that's mentioned here. He has keen insight into visions and dreams. That's what we'll be dealing with next week. People must have been impressed. The king was impressed, enough to assign Daniel and his friends to high-ranking positions. But the Babylonians didn't know everything. They saw the things you can measure. But we who get to read this story get behind the scenes. We're told that God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. God gave the 4 young men learning and skill in all letters and wisdom. God is the unseen source of everything good that takes place in Daniel's life, as the New Testament book of James tells us. Every good and perfect gift comes from above. So Nebuchadnezzar and all those who serve him are impressed with Daniel and the other 3. They appreciate their strength and their smarts, but they don't really know where it comes from. We who are reading learn these things. We know that as impressive as Daniel is, as intelligent and brave as he is, it all comes from the grace of God. He is what he is by the grace of God. It's a story not only of Daniel, but it's a story of God at work, giving Daniel what he needs, giving him favor. God is at work, even in Babylonian exile. The important question that this story raises is, who gets to decide who you really are? It's the question of identity. In Daniel's case, the empire had an answer. We're Babylon. We're in charge of you. We decide what's important. There were plenty of people in Daniel's position who allowed the empire to answer those ultimate questions. Who gets to decide who you really are? This story says no matter the setting, no matter how loud the competing voices, our core identity is child of God. God is the one who decides who we really are. We're not in Babylon today. We in the United States and actually around the world are dealing with a global pandemic, weeks of isolation, new habits being forced upon us, economic uncertainty and stress. In such a time, knowing who we are will make all the difference. So who do you think you are? The story of Daniel and the whole Bible says you're a child of God. And if that conviction is deep inside of us, if we're assured that we are in fact God's children, that will have a huge impact today. It will reduce our level of fear, increase our love for our neighbor, and make us better able to endure hardship. Remember who you are. You are a child of God. Amen.